Welcome or welcome back to Teen TV Deep Dive. Here on this channel, we talk about all things Teen TV. Today, we're going to be diving deep into Grownish. It's a spinoff of the TV show Blackish, if you're familiar with that, and it focuses on the eldest daughter's Zoey in her first year of college. It all takes place when Zoey is late for registration and she has to sign up for classes late, so she ends up taking this night class that she doesn't really want to be in, and there she finds this super solid friend group that we followed through the course of quite a few seasons. But in today's video, I wanted to focus on season one and all of the things that Zoey encountered during her first year of college. Of course, firstly, I wanted to talk about Zoey. I think she's very fabulous. She can dress very well. She's just golden inspo on hair, outfits, all of it. But one negative aspect of Zoey, I will say, is that she's kind of self absorbed. And I think it stems from how her character was portrayed in Blackish. She was the golden child, she was her dad's favorite always, and she was super popular in high school. I think everyone kind of always liking her, and Zoey just having this wow factor that really pulls and draws people in kind of adds to this sort of ego a little bit that we see as definitely a key point in Grownish. She is a fashion major, like I said, very fashionable into clothes and all things like that. And we see that in this first season, she's making steps towards that. She's working with fashion designing. She even gets an internship at Teen Vogue for a little bit. So she's actually making steps towards trying to achieve her goal of having a job within the fashion industry, which I thought was pretty cool. And like I said, just from her being that golden child, everybody always really liking her, I think that makes Zoey very impressionable and easy to sway the wrong way or make bad decisions because she wants to maintain a good image. She wants to have everyone be happy with her and like her to the point where she doesn't always make the best decisions. And even though she's impressionable, I think she's also convinced that she can handle everything. So you see a lot of times where Zoey should kind of say no to something because that adds too much on her plate, or she should tell somebody no because it's not the best for her, not the best decision for herself. She still does it because in her mind she feels as though she can handle everything. And then we see in this first season that within Zoey's friend group in class, she meets this older guy named Aaron, while everyone else in the friend group are freshmen. He's a sophomore. He's like this whole civil rights activist sort of vibe, very pro-black as well. And he kind of serves as the leader of the group, or kind of like the guider of everyone, because he has a little bit more experience of college life and being on your own in comparison to everyone else. And we see that Zoey is really drawn to him. And I think that's because he doesn't initially like her. Zoey just likes the idea of him. He's this older guy. He's giving her a little bit of attention, but not a whole lot. And I think that Zoey really enjoyed having to finally work for someone's affection towards her and work for someone to actually show interest in her. But I don't really think that was the best idea for her to try and get into a relationship based on that. Overall, I think Aaron just wasn't the move that season. You see that he was very hot and cold with Zoey. Sometimes they would hang out a lot, and Aaron would seem like he has a lot of interest in her. But then, as soon as they get around other people, or just for whatever reason, he would friend zone her, kind of put out these friends only vibes. And it just sent a lot of mixed messages towards Zoey, and it made her super confused, as well as having to constantly go to her friends and talk about these boy problems was pretty annoying for them as well. So I just don't think that what the energy that Aaron was giving to Zoey, I don't think it was worth all of the stress and emotional turmoil that she put herself through in that first season. And then we also see that there's another guy in the group named Luca, who he's very creative. He's also into art, fashion, just like Zoey, but he's a little bit too nonchalant. Y'all know I love like a creative, the artsy love interest in teen TV, but Luca was just a little bit too nonchalant, a little bit too experimental with the forms of art that he was into. But with Luca, I think you've seen an actual connection and a bond that him and Zoey can have. Like I said, they're both creatives into fashion. You actually see them share a passion and something to connect over. Where with Aaron and Zoey, I wasn't really getting that in that first season. I also did enjoy with Luca and Zoe's connection, how he made Zoe loosen up a little bit because sometimes she can be a little bit too um tightly wound, and that'll lead her to stressing out or having these like big meltdowns over super small things. And so I think her spending more time with Luca, having his like chill, nonchalant demeanor, was able to calm her down a lot. And in my opinion, Aaron is just as uptight as Zoe is. So just kind of having two very anxious, very uptight people, I don't think is a good relationship in the long run. Not to say that Luca is just all sunshine and rainbows, he also had his problems too. He was also finicky like Aaron with giving those signals to Zoe like, well, does he like me? Does he not like me? But it was in an avoidant way. And I do also think because Luca is portrayed in the show as more of a side character, really than like a staple main cast member. And you would see that there are moments where him and Zoe connect on a really personal level, or they'll hang out a lot or hang out a ton. And then we'll just go like 2 or 3 episodes without seeing him, or we really don't even hear from him in a way. So I think that was intentional to show that he's avoidant, he's wishy washy. And honestly, I think there is one particular moment where Zoe was experiencing a lot of creative burnout, and she just kind of hit a brick wall of where to kind of continue her creative ideas and fashion ideas. And so we had Luca kind of open up, and he was playing like some music for her, and they had this really good moment that was both beneficially just on a friendship level of him trying to support his friend in her career endeavors, but it also made this kind of romantic connection for him, and also showed that they have a little bit of chemistry and that there's more to Luca than just the super chill, laid back act that he puts up towards everyone. I think after Luca opening up, I feel like he was the move by the end of the first season. But we do see that Aaron and Zoe kind of have this vibe, and then as well as Luca and Zoe have this vibe where everyone is kind of swept up in this love triangle of sorts, even though no one actually wants to give real commitment to Zoe by telling their full feelings. Aaron and Luca already don't like each other, but then they dislike each other even more because they find out that they're both kind of vibing with Zoe in a similar way. So that leads to them saying that Zoe has to choose, but she's really conflicted because she likes both of them in such different ways that she's conflicted. Until it becomes to the point where Zoe's like, you know what? They're both annoying. This boy situation is stressing me out. And she swears off of boys in a way, or she wants to leave both of them alone. But we know that promise doesn't last for long, and Zoe ends up meeting this guy named Cash. Cash is a new basketball player at the school. He's supposed to bring so much traction and money to their college, as well as he has a super promising career at basketball and has the potential to be able to be in the NBA one day. But one struggle that he's having is that he isn't doing well academically. And then Zoe is trying to tutor to warm up to the dean because she wants more opportunities and internships for her fashion career. And so we see that Zoe starts tutoring Cash. And at first, she feels like he's cocky and he has this large ego where he feels like he's too good to have help from her. And then things kind of happen, they get to know each other, and they actually form a real relationship. They're boyfriend and girlfriend. This is Zoe's first love, first real relationship as well. But we see that Zoe just got a little too caught up in the relationship, and she was basically spending a lot of time with Cash. He ended up posting on social media, putting her business out there, saying how this is her first ever relationship and how she doesn't have as much dating experience as the average college student would. As well as when Cash was on TV, he kind of put Zoey on the spot by saying that she was willing to uproot her life and shape her future around Cash and his basketball career. And that's something that Zoey was on the verge of kind of considering it, but I loved how she recognized it before it was too late. Of course, with the help of her mom, Rainbow came, showed up to college, kind of spent a little bit of time with Zoey, and then they talked it out and her relationship struggles that she was having with Cash. I do think that out of all three guys, initially Cash had the most promise. He was an athlete. He had a future career kind of going for himself because no hate to Aaron or Luca, but I don't know how many job openings there are for a civil rights activist and a artist. Like Cash had more potential and more immediate results with his career. So I do kind of see how Zoey felt like a relationship with Cash would have been more stable than with the other two. But also Cash was just a lot more open and forthcoming with his feelings and what he thought about Zoey. And I think that was continuous throughout their entire relationship. You always knew where Cash kind of stood with Zoey and how he was feeling about things. So I did think that it was the right choice for Zoey to actually be in a relationship with Cash. But with that, Zoey ends up hitting a bump in the road again when Cash mentions that he kind of wants her to reroute her life for him. She feels like this might not be the relationship for her anymore, which is totally valid. And so now we're back to this three-way love triangle between Aaron, Luca, and Cash. And Zoey is even more conflicted on who she should be with, if she should even be in a relationship at this point in time. And she ends up breaking things off with Cash and Aaron and ultimately chooses Luca. And she feels like they had this familiarity with each other and a bond that she just couldn't replicate with other two. As for this whole love triangle situation, it gets pretty crazy and pretty intense. But now I wanted to talk more about the side characters and the friendships that we see Zoey's in outside of her romantic interests. The first friend that we see Zoey meet is Anna. They're actually college roommates. They share a dorm together. But Anna we see as the outcast of the group because she has differing political beliefs and ideologies than the rest of the group. She's conservative, but a lot of the others tend to lean towards the left. And it is something that they dive into in the series. I think that's a really interesting point and storyline to have, is that a lot of the topics that they bring up in the show, a lot of times, as Aaron being more into civil rights and being an activist, of course, he's going to be more left leaning and liberal. But having Anna have those contrasting beliefs and all of them all together are able to have these dialogues where they learn from each other and kind of get to know things from a different perspective, I think is pretty cool. But one thing about Anna that I didn't really like is that she was a little bit too by the book, and a lot of times it seemed like she was on a high horse for being the goody two shoes of the group and kind of looked down at everyone else. I wish that she was a little bit more self-contained with things like that. And what I mean by that is that if she felt like that was bad, she just wouldn't do it, but also wouldn't feel like it was her job to shame someone or look down on that other person because they did something that she doesn't necessarily agree with. The next friend I wanted to talk about was Nomi. Nomi is bi. That's kind of like her representation that she adds to the table. Nomi is kind of known to be very blunt. Sometimes she gives logical advice, which is very helpful, especially when Zoey was going through all of her boy trouble this season. But there were other times where I felt like she was overstepping or more so adding an opinion to the situation more than advice or just a shoulder to lean on and to be able to vent as a friend. And I think that a lot of times Nomi felt like she was able to always throw in her 2 cents to every situation just because she wasn't the messy one of the group. She wasn't the person that was always coming to the friend group with problems like Zoey was. So I feel like Nomi had this self acclaimed title of being like the one that has all of their stuff together. And I don't necessarily think that she was. Nomi overall just has never been one of my favorites of the season just because, like I said, the constant overstepping and kind of viewing herself as a lot more together than what she actually is just didn't really speak to me as a character. One thing that I do like about Nomi though is how she interacts with side characters. Like she has such funny banter and back and forth with a lot of the side characters and some funny like side stories that we see throughout the show. But I feel like she's rude to the main cast, so it kind of cancels out almost immediately. The next two friends I wanted to talk about were Jazz and Sky. They're twins, but they were often treated like the same person. They were student athletes. I believe they were all from California, but something that's a little bit different from Jazz and Sky to the rest of the friend group is that they didn't have as much of a privileged background like the rest of them. But they were so real. Like they always spoke their mind, but it was in a way that was like funny, but also never really made anyone feel that bad about their situation at hand. I also felt like they didn't feel so susceptible to the pressures and peer pressure of college, which I thought was really commendable. My only critique for Jazz and Sky in this first season is that I wish they had their own storylines and just weren't treated as this like one unit. I think that it's cool to have like sister unity, of course, and they're twins in a new place. So of course they would be close and lean on each other, but to have them both have different experiences, I feel like would have been nice to see in the first season. But I think that is something that's addressed in the later seasons afterwards. Next, I wanted to talk about Vivek. He is a child of immigrants. He is a freelance pharmacist, and as well as he's just kind of lame. I think it's cool because it breaks the stereotype of what you think a freelance street pharmacist would be like and would look like for some. I don't think you would expect someone that's in school for like computer science, I believe. He's very smart, but he's also not the coolest. He doesn't get much attention from girls. He's never been one of the guys who's like super cool and has a lot of street cred. So I feel like that was another stereotype that the show was working towards breaking. I don't necessarily think it's a good one though, but it was just kind of funny though. Overall, Grownish has its pros and its cons to its characters, but I think there were overall some good themes of showing like political beliefs and discourse with that in a respectful way, as well as sharing stories and having characters from all different racial backgrounds, as well as everyone coming from different family structures and kind of coming together in college to have this found family like structure, as well as sexuality and identity. Those were things that were brought up a lot in the first season, especially with having characters like Nomi and some of the side storylines that she kind of encountered throughout the first season. But now it's time for my final thoughts. I think my favorite characters, which it was really hard, but I would definitely have to say Zoey. I feel like from Blackish, I seen a lot of myself in her, so I enjoyed that as a character, and it kind of felt like seeing myself go to college in some ways. But also, I liked Jazz and Sky. They were just so real and so honest, and I love that. I love the honesty, and it made them super funny and enjoyable to watch. Out of all the three guys in the love triangle or love web, whatever you want to call it, with Zoey, I definitely would have been Team Luca. I feel like at the end of season 1, he was the move. He was able to push past a lot of his layers and holdups that he had um before the other two were, in my opinion. But comment down below your thoughts. Were you Team Aaron, Team Luca, or Team Cash? I'd love to know. But overall, I feel like the main lesson after all of the boy drama of the three guys, I feel like the lesson shouldn't have been follow your heart, but to leave those unserious college boys alone. None of them were serious. None of them were ready for marriage by any means necessary. And also, a lot of them had bad communication and issues with how they were able to deal with their relationship, as well as a lot of untapped insecurities that they had that showed in how they interacted with romantic relationships. So that's all for today. If you enjoyed, please make sure to like as well as to subscribe.